I think about violence all the time. Well, if your testosterone is 25 times what it's supposed to be, what the hell do you think it's going to make you think about?
If you've ever wanted to see a man's entire reputation implode in real time, this is the story for you. This man bragged about having an IQ above 160. He called himself a perfectionist with a PhD, who built an empire teaching people the science of fitness, until the science turned on him.
Did the weight training or the training, because you were wrestling before, did it change your win-loss record? Did you become a better wrestler?
So unfortunately, I got less and less invested in wrestling for a few other reasons, sort of outside the scope. But my ability with whatever technique I knew to make the match go my way was like exponentially increased. I mean, if you're just fucking jacked and you're a sophomore wrestler, you just win 50% of your matches automatically just because you're fucking stronger.
For nearly a decade, Dr. Mike Israetel was kind of untouchable. He was the self-anointed godfather of evidence-based lifting, the man with credentials no one else could challenge, the walking embodiment of smart bodybuilding. His YouTube channel taught millions how to train optimally. His company, Renaissance Periodization, promised results PhD approved. His fans worshipped his lectures about fatigue management and minimum effective volume as if they were gospel. He sold himself as the future of fitness until someone actually read the research that gave him his title.
Keeps getting worse for Mike Israetel. I mean, Mr. Mike.
In September 2025, a YouTuber named Solomon Nelson did what no journalist, no coach, and apparently no professor had ever done. He opened Dr. Mike's doctoral thesis. What he found wasn't science, it was something else really hard to explain. As you'll see later in this video, entire tables of data made no sense. One section claimed Division I athletes weighed an average of 73 kilos with a standard deviation of 71. But these numbers were so wrong as they implied some players weighed less than a newborn baby. Whole chapters had been copied and pasted word for word, typos included, as if the keyboard had been dropped in wet cement, and every few lines, words simply fused together because the man behind the PhD-approved brand couldn't find his spacebar.
Mike, overall, are you proud of your PhD dissertation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The discovery spread like wildfire. Within 72 hours, Dr. Mike went from YouTube's most credible coach to its most ridiculed. Everybody was making a video about it. The same man who once claimed he was smarter than almost every coach in the world was suddenly the punchline of every fitness meme page. His defenders tried to spin it by first saying it was only a draft, then insisting the real version was perfect, then uploading a Google Doc final copy that turned out to be owned by a digital marketing agency. Every new explanation only made him look guiltier. And it wasn't just the thesis. Months earlier, during his doomed attempt to earn an IFBB Pro card, Mike had confessed on camera that his steroid cycles left him boiling with rage and anxiety, haunted by violent, intrusive thoughts, even as he claimed superior willpower to everyone else. He feuded publicly with Greg Doucette, calling him a two-faced sociopath, and spent podcast after podcast bragging that his intelligence and toughness placed him above ordinary men.
I just want to be really clear about something. This is very, very important that people tune in. I had many conversations with Stephen Hawking himself when him and I were in the waiting room at Epstein's Island.
Then, when Solomon's expose hit, he panicked. Thousands of critical comments vanished from his channel overnight. Friends turned silent. Even Dr. Milo Wolf was dragged into the fallout after releasing a failed defense video that the internet immediately tore apart. This is literally how the self-proclaimed smartest man in fitness became its biggest joke, not through some scandal or crime, but through the one thing he worshipped most: science. Before the YouTube channels, the lectures, and the endless claims of science-based training, there was just a teenage wrestler in a high school gym.
So, I wrestled in high school, and then in college I started powerlifting.
Long before anyone called him Dr. Mike, he was just Mike, an undersized kid with more questions than muscles. Wrestling practice was misery, push-ups for losing, sides for mistakes, laps for breathing too hard. Coaches treated effort like punishment, and Mike couldn't make sense of it.
So wrestling itself wasn't a super awesome experience for me, even though I got to be sort of decent at it.
Yeah.
But and then something had to take its place. I definitely wasn't good enough to go to college to wrestle, and I went to college for academics. And by the time I went to college, I was so burnt out on the idea of wrestling. Like, I would literally every year, I would right after wrestling season, I would basically start lifting super hard again because I couldn't lift while wrestling. It was just too much.
Yep.
So I would just be
If training made athletes better, why was it being used to hurt them?
a bunch of different coaches, and they didn't they kind of used exercise as punishment for us.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a lot of wrestling programs.
For some reason, it just didn't. I was an exercise addict in training, so I couldn't understand exercise as bad. Like, I remember I had a philosophical realization early in wrestling where I was like, okay, if training makes us better and we want to get better, wouldn't rewarding us with more training be more intelligent than punishing us with more training?
Yep.
That simple but stubborn question lodged in his head. While his teammates groaned through another set of burpees, Mike thought like a scientist. Why did the adults in charge believe pain built discipline? Why punish improvement? One afternoon, after being told to run laps for slacking, he had the thought that would define the rest of his life. If training makes us better, shouldn't more training be a reward, not a penalty? It was a small act of rebellion, the kind that doesn't make headlines but quietly reroutes a person's future. You see, instead of quitting the sport, he fell in love with the mechanics behind it. The leverage, the timing, the way strength and fatigue interacted. He started reading whatever he could find about muscle physiology and conditioning, scribbling notes about force production in the margins of his homework. Where other kids wanted to win matches, Mike wanted to decode them. Every takedown and reversal became an experiment. The wrestling room became his first laboratory. It wasn't about being the best athlete anymore, it was about understanding why certain movements worked at all. While his friends chased trophies, Mike chased patterns, data, and the satisfaction of finding an answer no one else had bothered to ask. That quiet frustration with bad coaching, like those endless laps, meant to break him, had done the opposite. It planted the idea that there had to be a smarter way to train, one that replaced superstition with science. That single thought would grow into an obsession, one that would eventually take him from sweaty high school mats to university laboratories, and later to the center of a fitness empire. By the time he graduated high school, Mike's obsession had matured into something bigger than sports. It was now about answers, real answers. He enrolled at the University of Michigan to study kinesiology, a program built on anatomy labs, biomechanics charts, and the precise language of physiology. After Michigan, he chased deeper specialization at Appalachian State University, earning a master's degree in exercise science. Here he learned how to design research. It was the closest he'd come to real-world validation of his teenage theory. That effort, if measured and understood, could be engineered. He wasn't just an athlete anymore. He was a student of the mechanism of effort itself. But a master's wasn't enough. The people Mike idolized had one thing he didn't, the title doctor. And so, in 2010, he entered a PhD program in sport physiology at East Tennessee State University, a small but respected campus with a heavy emphasis on strength and conditioning research. Over 3 years, he immersed himself in data collection, testing 80 Division I athletes across 4 different sports. He measured everything he could: strength, power output, vertical jump height, sprint speed, and the subtle correlations between them. The project became his identity. His dissertation, titled Interrelationships of Fitness Characteristics in Division I Athletes, aimed to map the connections between the qualities that defined elite performance. It was an ambitious study, an attempt to quantify the invisible threads linking raw strength to speed, muscle power to explosiveness. For Mike, it was proof that his teenage hunch about smart training could finally live inside real numbers, equations, and peer-reviewed logic. When he defended his thesis in 2013, he walked out of the lecture hall with more than a doctorate. He walked out with a symbol. To him, those 3 letters, PhD, meant he had solved the riddle that began on a wrestling mat years earlier. From that point on, he wasn't just Mike the athlete, he was Dr. Mike, the scientist of strength, armed with data, confidence, and a belief that he could outthink anyone in the room.
I'm both on a raw IQ scale smarter than almost every coach, maybe every coach.
Armed with his new title, Mike stepped into academia with the confidence of a man convinced he was born for it. He took on teaching positions first at Temple University, then at the University of Central Missouri, lecturing in exercise and sports science. His students remember him as sharp, intense, and deeply proud of his credentials. Every slide, every diagram, every data set seemed to reinforce the same idea. He wasn't just teaching fitness, he was redefining it. But academia was small, confined, and slow. Mike wanted a bigger audience, one that didn't just grade his ideas, but worshipped them. That opportunity came when he reconnected with his old college friend Nick Shaw. Together, they built a company that would fuse Mike's scientific credibility with Nick's entrepreneurial instinct. They called it Renaissance Periodization, or RP Strength for short. The premise was simple but radical. Use scientific principles to create optimized training and nutrition programs for the masses. In an industry overflowing with bro science and intuition, RP promised math, data, and precision. Each program was PhD approved, stamped with Mike's academic authority. It was the perfect marriage of credibility and commerce. But the real turning point came in 2012, when Mike decided to take his ideas directly to the internet. The RP YouTube channel began modestly, filled with simple lectures and workout clips filmed in dim gyms and cluttered offices. Over time, the videos became more structured, more deliberate. Mike didn't just demonstrate exercises, he dissected them. He explained abstract concepts like minimum effective volume, maximum recoverable volume, and deloading with the precision of a researcher diagramming a physics experiment.
Hey guys, Dr. Israetel here, continuing on in our personal training course with lecture number 4, which is on the nutrition basics. Just the real basics of nutrition so that you can help your clients change their body composition, their strength, their health, etc., not just from a training perspective, but also from a nutritional perspective.
He didn't shout like other fitness influencers. He lectured, calmly, logically, like a professor whose lab coat had just been swapped for a tank top. To viewers exhausted by years of vague gym advice and anecdotal wisdom, Dr. Mike sounded like a scientist decoding muscle growth in real time, and it was a really good thing. Or so everyone thought.
Dr. Mike here for RP Strength.
By 2020, RP Strength had ballooned into one of the most trusted fitness brands online, boasting mobile apps, diet templates, and coaching packages that promise scientifically validated results. The YouTube channel alone soared past 3.8 million subscribers, a number unheard of for academic-style content. Mike had become the internet's definitive voice of evidence-based training, the man who made science cool in a world still obsessed with biceps and bench presses. But underneath the spreadsheets and citations, the same energy that once drove him as a teenager, the obsession with being smarter than everyone else, was quietly evolving into something more dangerous. In his pursuit of credibility, Mike had turned science into branding, and soon the title that built his empire would become the very thing that destroyed it. Around the end of 2019, Dr. Mike had become a fixture in the fitness world. He spoke in studies, citations, and clean data, but not everyone was impressed. On December 5th, 2019, another YouTuber, Greg Doucette, dropped a grenade into the middle of Mike's evidence-based empire. The video was titled, "Is Volume Killing Your Gains?" And it wasn't subtle. Greg mocked the entire science-based lifting movement as a haven for lazy lifters who used research papers as excuses not to suffer.
This is what I see in the gym. People are lazy, people don't train hard, and so to tell someone to hold back when they're already holding back is moronic and asinine. Tell them, work harder. How hard? Harder than you.
Greg wasn't offering citations, he was offering certainty. And for a lot of viewers, that hit harder than any data table ever could. You see, there were two sides to this thing. Team Greg was the old-school warriors who believed progress came from pain. Team Mike, on the other hand, were the methodical thinkers who believed in controlled variables and planned recovery.
How many sets should you do in a workout? Is it 10, 20, 30, and is it 3 times a week, 2 times a week? What's the minimum effective volume? What is the max intensity? What is RPE? Stop all the scientific mumbo-jumbo. Train harder.
Even though the video wasn't attacking Mike directly, he predictably couldn't let it go. When asked about Greg's rant during an interview, he smirked and brushed it off as noise.
I'm going to train exactly this hard. Now, we can talk later about what this hard should be, but let's even say to failure, right? Just to standardize it. I'm going to go to failure in every single, I'm going to push it psychologically like crazy. After you've answered the question of how hard am I going to train, you say to failure, you have to answer the second question of, well, so how many sets am I going to do? Yes, there is a tendency for higher volume programs for you to get tired and not work as hard. So that may cap how much effective volume, non-junk volume you can do. But all the volume you do from the first set to the nth set, if you hold yourself accountable, you can do them with maximum intent to lift, all-out failure. You're still left with the question of how much, which unfortunately, I'm pretty sure I saw the entire video by Greg. He never actually answers the question of how much. He just says, go harder, and he yells a lot, which is funny.
For the first time, Dr. Mike's logical tone met an immovable force, charisma. Greg didn't need peer review, he had conviction. The clash wasn't just about reps or sets anymore, it was a collision between two worldviews. 2 weeks after Greg's viral rant, the two men finally faced each other. December 18th, 2019 was the day the internet got its first glimpse of Dr. Mike outside his home turf. It was supposed to be a professional debate, a meeting of intellect and experience. Instead, it turned into something closer to a slow-motion character study in hubris. Greg arrived calm. He listened, nodded, let Mike talk, and Mike talked a lot.
Beginning of your mesocycle progression before you deload, 4 or 5, 6 weeks, you probably start at the lower end of that range. So if you're intermediate, 3, 4, 5 sets, get a little bit sore, get a little bit of a pump, and then add volume to keep getting a little bit sore, keep getting a little bit of a pump. As you add volume, your pump's going to get better. Your soreness is going to probably increase, although not a ton because you're adding volume as you get used to things. Your tension perception sure as hell will increase, and then at some point you simply won't be able to match your performance anymore when you're doing workouts that are like 10 sets per body part or per muscle group per session. At that point, when you can't match your performance 2 sessions in a row, you deload, wash away the fatigue, and then repeat the progression probably from the lower end going into the higher end.
Gotcha. Okay,
Can I
now
ask a question just about that? Just a quick, So basically, Mike, so if I was to do a mesocycle and started, are you suggesting that maybe I should do like a lower amount of, like say me, I'm doing 8 sets. Would I be better off to lower that to say 4 or 5?
He dissected concepts, recited definitions, and threw around academic phrases with the ease of someone certain he was the smartest man in the room, but somewhere in that confidence was a sneer. He interrupted, smirked, even yawned mid-discussion as Greg spoke. It wasn't subtle. To viewers, it didn't look like a debate, it looked like a professor grading a student. Greg stayed patient. He asked for clarity, pressed for practical answers, and smiled through Mike's dismissiveness. And while neither man budged from their positions, the optics couldn't have been clearer. Mike looked irritated that he even had to explain himself. Greg looked like the only adult in the room. When the debate ended, the real verdict came not from the arguments, but from the comment section. Thousands of comments echoed the same sentiment. Mike looks so fed up of Greg the whole time. Mike looks like he's aged 10 years since this video. Greg left his ego at the door for this one, Mike didn't. For the first time, Dr. Mike's polished persona didn't shine so bright anymore. The debate didn't destroy his reputation, but it exposed something that would. It proved that behind the numbers and formulas, there was a man who couldn't stand being questioned. It wasn't just about training anymore, it was about what fitness itself meant. Greg believed progress was earned through suffering. Mike believed it was optimized through intellect. And neither man was willing to admit that maybe, just maybe, they were both a little bit right. By mid-2023, 4 years after the debate that dented his aura, Dr. Mike was ready for redemption. He framed it not as a comeback, but as an experiment. The lab coat was going back on, this time in the form of posing trunks. His new goal was to earn an IFBB Pro card, the sport's ultimate credential, and in doing so, prove that his science-based training system actually worked. The announcement lit up his followers' feeds. Here was the man who'd spent years dissecting hypertrophy with a whiteboard finally stepping onto the stage to test his theories under the lights. He believed that if his models were right, he should be able to reach pro-level conditioning without doing anything magical, just the right programming, nutrition, and recovery. But to reach that level, science would need a little help. Mike was candid about using anabolic steroids, openly discussing them in videos and podcasts as part of a responsible, research-minded approach. For many fans, that honesty was refreshing. For critics, it was hypocrisy because he once positioned himself as fitness's moral compass and was now leaning on the same chemical shortcuts he'd once implied were avoidable with good programming. Soon, the side effects started bleeding through his content. Mike began describing crippling anxiety, bouts of rage, and sleepless nights.
You mentioned from personal experience being aware of the dark side of anabolic use. What is that?
How long do you have? Anxiety like you would not believe. Every day that I'm on high doses, I wake up in the morning afraid of the rest of my day. Intrusive thoughts. I think about violence all the time. Well, if your testosterone is 25 times what it's supposed to be, what the hell do you think it's going to make you think about? Another one is a marked proximate reduction of IQ. Like right now, as I talk to you, I'm on contest prep. I'm on a considerable dose of anabolics. I'm not as smart right now, and I can feel it. It's this fog, an inability to perceive a broad spectrum of positive human emotion. I live in a really beautiful area in Michigan, and I walk out, and there's this pond and these trees, and I know that I like looking at them, but it's a memory to me. I go work out every morning, and I look at the pond and the trees, and I'm like all I feel is rage and frustration and anger and anxiety.
For the first time, the evidence-based lifter sounded like a man losing control of his own experiment. His meticulous variables, training volume, fatigue management, recovery windows meant nothing against the unpredictable chemistry now ruling his brain. Yet even as the warnings piled up from doctors, colleagues, and fans, Mike pressed forward. The pro card, he said, was non-negotiable. As the prep dragged on, the confident, analytical Dr. Mike began to unravel in front of his own camera. Dr. Mike had become the case study he never meant to write, trapped in a feedback loop where the scientist and the subject were one and the same. Greg Doucette had made a career out of yelling at people through a camera, but when he turned his attention back to Dr. Mike in 2024, there was something different in his voice. It wasn't just mockery this time, it was kind of concern, buried under the theatrics.
I have severe anxiety disorder.
What this is a sign of is some form of a chronic illness. This is not good, it's not healthy, and somebody with all of these health markers combined probably shouldn't be competing. Why is Mike risking his health, risking his life, in order to get up on stage?
After months of watching Mike spiral deeper into his science-based prep, Greg began uploading a series of reaction videos that walked a fine line between roasting and warning. He pointed out the telltale signs of growth hormone abuse, the swelling jawline, the bloated face, the strange tightness in Mike's expressions. Then came the laundry list: insulin stacking, sky-high blood pressure, polypharmacy, the term Greg used for the dangerous cascade of drugs used to offset the side effects of other drugs. He spoke about the reality of steroids and drug abuse. You take one thing for muscle, another thing for your heart, and another to fix that thing. Before you know it, you're on 10 different medications trying to stay alive.
It keeps getting worse for Mike Israetel. I mean, Mr. Mike.
He mocked Mike's excuses, yes, but between the jokes was a genuine question that resonated with the audience. Why is Mike risking his life for a trophy? And then came the breaking point, July 2024. After years of preparation, steroids, and self-imposed torment, Mike finally stepped on stage at a national show and failed to place in the top 5. It should have been a humbling moment. Instead, Mike blamed his tanning, saying, "I placed out of the top 5 because of insufficient tanning," he told his followers, as if the problem had been lighting, not the years of chemical exhaustion.
Into objectively the best shape of my life, I placed out of the top 5 at my most recent show. In large part, sort of hilariously, because of insufficient tanning. It wasn't the tan. It wasn't the tan.
Greg pounced again. The internet laughed, but for Mike, it wasn't funny anymore. The humiliation was public, the narrative slipping from his hands. By October 2024, the tension that had been simmering for years finally erupted. Mike appeared in an interview titled "Why Mike Israetel Hates Greg Doucette," and from the first minute, it was clear that this wasn't going to be a calm, professional rebuttal.
Greg Doucette, who is a two-faced, lying sociopath sucker, he talked magic in his videos with his fake voice about how stupid I was and how wrong I was about volume or whatever it was about. And I was like, oh, this guy wants a shot at the title. So when we got face to face in a debate, I mirrored that energy. And he turned off his parrot voice and went straight into nice guy agreeable mode. And almost all the comments were like, oh my God, this Mike guy's a asshole. And this Greg guy just came to the comment.
He didn't hold back. He called him a lying sociopath sucker, said Greg made him look stupid on purpose. He claimed the 2019 debate was a setup, that Greg had tricked him by pretending to be calm and agreeable just to make him look arrogant. What followed wasn't just an attack on Greg, it was a declaration of self-worship. Mike started drawing invisible battle lines between himself and the rest of the fitness world, boasting about his intellect, his toughness, his superiority. It was the kind of unfiltered arrogance that only someone utterly convinced of their own genius could say aloud, and the internet noticed. Clips of him flexing his intelligence flooded social media, stitched together with side-by-side footage of him trembling on camera, describing his anxiety, his rage, his inability to sleep. The contrast was jarring. The more Mike talked about his superiority, the smaller he looked, because buried beneath the swagger, the insults, and the IQ boasts was a single fragile thread: his PhD. The credential that built his empire. The title that gave him authority, and soon someone was about to pull that thread loose. In late September 2025, a relatively small but respected creator named Solomon Nelson dropped a 2-hour video that would shake the foundation of Mike Israetel's entire career. The title alone was a death sentence: Mike Israetel's PhD, the biggest academic sham in fitness? Unlike other commentators who mocked Mike's ego or debated his workout philosophy, Solomon took a scalpel to the one thing Mike held sacred: his doctorate. He didn't rant, he didn't speculate, he read line by line, table by table, citation by citation. And what he uncovered was nothing short of catastrophic.
Other JD students at Melbourne Law School use their database access to read case law. I used mine to download Mike Israetel's PhD thesis, which I read in its entirety.
Mike's 2013 dissertation, The Interrelationships of Fitness Characteristics in Division I Athletes, was supposed to be a study comparing 80 Division I athletes across 4 sports, measuring variables like strength, power, sprint speed, and vertical jump. It sounded rigorous. It looked credible, but Solomon revealed that beneath the academic jargon was a document so riddled with errors that it could barely pass for undergraduate work. He began with the findings, or rather the lack of them. Mike's entire research contribution boiled down to the most painfully obvious conclusions imaginable. Stronger athletes were more muscular and powerful. More powerful athletes jumped higher and ran faster. Leaner athletes performed better.
Thesis falls short of fulfilling one of the most fundamental requirements for doctoral research: a significant contribution of original knowledge. The stated goal of Mike's thesis was to explore interrelationships among fitness variables that he claimed were less clear in the existing literature. However, the core findings, that stronger athletes are more muscular and powerful, that more powerful athletes jump higher and sprint faster, and that leaner athletes perform better in these tasks, are not only unsurprising, but also extensively documented in prior research, even by 2013. You don't have to take it from me. Just listen to Mike himself, who openly concedes this throughout the document. For instance, in Chapter 3, Mike explicitly notes that the finding that stronger athletes produce higher rates of force development has been
Then Solomon went for the data itself, and that's where the real damage began. In one of the dissertation's key tables, Mike reported that the lowest performing athletes had a mean body mass of 73.9 kilograms with a standard deviation of 71.8 kilograms.
6 and 4.7 report that for the 20 lowest performers, the mean body masses were 73.9 kilos and 75.3 kilos respectively, with standard deviations of 71.8 kilos, virtually equal to the means themselves. This is a statistical absurdity. Standard deviation measures the spread of the data around the mean. A standard deviation this large, relative to the mean, is nonsensical in a biological context. For this to be true, given a normal distribution, it would mean that roughly 1/3 of the lowest performing athletes in Table 4.6 had a body mass either greater than 145.7 kilos or less than 2.1 kilos, the weight of a newborn.
Worse still, he discovered the same copy and paste error repeated 3 separate times in different tables. The standard deviation values for one group had been copied directly from another, a clear sign of either carelessness or fabrication.
One of the sloppiest features of Mike's thesis is the rampant copy-pasting of entire sections across chapters, with identical errors left untouched. The methods section, in chapters 4 and 5, are near verbatim clones of those in chapter 3, reproducing the exact same typos, the exact same formatting mistakes, and the exact same structural oversights, of which there are many, which is strong evidence that large portions of the thesis were duplicated wholesale without even a cursory proofread.
On one page, Mike had literally pasted the same passage twice in a row. Solomon zoomed in to show it side by side.
Spelling errors are everywhere. Mike misspells the word vertical as vetical or vetrical, individual as invididual, properties as propertites, biomechanics as biomechanins, neural as neural, training as traininiger, science as sense, as already noted, and exercise as exercise or exercise.
Then came the grammar and spelling errors of hundreds of them. But the most damning discovery came in the citations. In one reference, Mike listed an impossible page range implying that the article ended before it began, and even inserted a random comma before the period. The same broken reference appeared uncorrected on 3 separate pages. In another instance, Mike cited a book on training periodization to support a claim about psychological variables, something the cited text didn't even discuss.
The reference lists themselves are an untamed mess. Across 4 separate bibliographies, Mike fails to italicize journal names, misformats volume and issue numbers.
Every few minutes, Solomon would zoom out to remind viewers of what they were looking at, the cornerstone of Mike Israetel's career, the PhD that made Dr. Mike possible. And with each section he tore apart, the myth of the meticulous, high IQ scientist began to crumble. By the time the video ended, there was no ambiguity left. The man who spent years preaching precision and data integrity had built his empire on a foundation of sloppy numbers and unchecked ego. And for the first time, the evidence was right there in black and white, and now impossible to ignore. When Solomon's video finished dissecting the document, what emerged wasn't a simple case of academic sloppiness, it was a full-blown collapse of credibility. The findings were brutal in their simplicity. There was no original contribution. Mike's dissertation didn't break new ground or advance the field of exercise science, it merely proved that stronger athletes perform better, a conclusion so self-evident it could have been written on a locker room wall. And disturbingly, many academics agreed. Professors in the exercise science field began commenting that they'd seen far worse dissertations pass at major universities. Some admitted that the entire discipline had grown complacent, peer review often reduced to rubber-stamping mediocrity. Some commenters even joked that Mike had been training for failure all along. Was this a failure of one man, or proof that the science-based movement he helped pioneer was built on the same fragile trust as his thesis? In the days after Solomon Nelson's exposé detonated across the internet, Mike Israetel did what any man cornered by his own evidence would do. He tried to erase it. Within hours, the public link to his dissertation on East Tennessee State University's database quietly vanished, now accessible only to students and alumni. Then came the excuse. On a live stream clip circulating soon after, Mike appeared almost casual as he brushed off the entire situation.
I guess technically I submitted the wrong draft to the graduate school.
Oopsie. It was the kind of line that might have worked for a misplaced assignment, not a doctoral thesis. But he said it with conviction, like the problem wasn't the content itself, but that the audience dared to notice. Soon after, his longtime friend and collaborator, Dr. Milo Wolf, stepped in to clear things up. On October 3rd, 2025, Milo released a video titled Dr. Mike Responds, The Truth About His PhD.
It's a narrative built on spectacle, not on scholarship. I personally wasn't satisfied taking Solomon's word for it. Dr. Mike is a friend of mine, and I know he's a smart guy, but friendship aside, I wanted to see for myself. So I read through the citation in full, and then I spoke directly to Dr.
Framed as a neutral fact check, it functioned as a desperate cleanup operation. Milo claimed that Solomon had reviewed an outdated draft, not the official version that had been examined and passed in 2013. He even displayed what he said was the real final version, free of typos, data errors, and the statistical absurdities that had gone viral.
To make one thing very clear, the version of Mike's dissertation I've reviewed is a much later draft. This is the document Mike himself saved, defended, and sent to me, and it corrects many of the typos and inconsistencies that Solomon highlighted in his video.
He claims that the draft corrects many of the inconsistencies Solomon highlighted, and through no one's fault in particular, the earlier version is the one that ended up online. Milo even suggested that Solomon's obsession bordered on personal bias, noting that he'd made over 10 videos about Mike, totaling more than 13 hours of content.
Then, to date, Solomon has made more than 10 videos about Mike. That's over 13 hours of content, targeting a single person. Topics range from 2-hour collaborations critiquing Mike's bodybuilding performance, to hour-long reactions to his surgery, to videos like this one attacking his academic record. A quick look at his views on videos where he features Mike versus his non-Mike content shows an enormous discrepancy in his views. When one person becomes your channel's most reliable source of outrage, views, and income, it raises the question of motive.
But the damage control didn't stop there. To reinforce the narrative, both Mike and Milo subtly downplayed the very value of the PhD that had once defined Mike's brand.
And so the PhD isn't some kind of proof of your superiority, it is step one in an academic research career, which most people don't even end up taking. That's my PhD. It's a mediocre step one to giving me a PhD, and not much more than that. Never claimed that it was much more than that.
It was a stunning reversal, but the first discovery was damning. The final version Milo claimed Solomon had missed was dated March 2013. Solomon's supposedly outdated copy was August 2013, 5 months later, which meant that if Milo was telling the truth, Mike had somehow defended and submitted his thesis before it even existed. Then came the smoking gun, the public record for the East Tennessee State University repository. The same one where Mike had hastily restricted access showed an edit timestamp of October 3rd, 2025, just days after Solomon's exposé went live. But the real humiliation came when someone checked the Google Doc ownership for the final version Milo had linked in his video description. It wasn't owned by Mike, but by an account traced to a digital marketing agency. That's right, the corrected PhD defending a supposed academic titan was literally managed by a PR firm. By then, the ridicule had reached critical mass. Cornered, Mike finally conceded what everyone already knew. Solomon had the correct version all along, but rather than own the deceit, he reframed it as a minor technical mix-up. The data errors he claimed were simply clerical mistakes. Even those who had defended him early on began to retreat. For all his attempts at loyalty, Milo's credibility had been dragged down with the ship. Meanwhile, Mike distanced himself completely. No statements, no clarifications, no defense of Milo's intentions, just silence. Mike never once addressed the scandal on his main YouTube channel. Not a post, not a community tab, not even a cryptic tweet. He simply kept uploading training videos, Q&As, and podcasts as if nothing had happened. And somehow, it worked. His subscriber count rose instead of fell. Engagement dipped for a week or two, then recovered. The algorithm, blind to integrity, did what algorithms do. It rewarded consistency, not honesty. The silence saved his platform, but it buried his legacy. For someone who built his empire on being smarter than everyone else, it was arrogance that ended him.